we never regain. Stuck in a losing game, we pass the blame. Cycle starts again, we break with a chance to remake. It's up of our mistakes. We follow the lead, but it leads to nothing when nothing is left to claim. We fell addicted to fame and promise of grandeur, but promises never stain. They say you can only get better from here. They say there's plenty more to go. All the answers turn to words that disengage. A will surrenders, letting our future start to fade away. All the answers turn to words that rearrange. We're caught in a sunset, taking a last breath as we fade away.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of Restoring the Roar. I am your host, Alex Loosemore. Got a shorter show tonight, but lots to talk about still. Before I hop into any of it, I'd like to tell you this show is partnered with Zagnif Apparel. So you can visit the link in the banner down below. It is etsy.com/shop/Zagnif Apparel Design. The coupon is FOOBS15 at checkout. It gets you 15% off on select items. Thank you again to Zagnif Apparel for partnering with us, and let's get into the show. All right, so obviously this past weekend was the Combine, so we're going to go over that. A little bit of reacting to the Dan Campbell press conference, some things to take away from what he said in there. Also, Brad Holmes, the GM. Speaking of Brad Holmes, the GM, my article from this past week was ranking every Brad Holmes draft selection. There's 15 of them. So we'll go through the list. And I'll give a shorter explanation than I did in the article. If you want to read the full thing, go to nfcnorthreport.com. I write one article a week there for them. Or I see that we're going to talk about Foobies now. No, Ben. But first of all, thank you, Ben, for tuning in, says first, and Andrew says second. Thank you guys both for tuning in. And then after that article, just kind of one more thing to go over, why the Lions shouldn't consider Lamar Jackson. He was given the non-exclusive franchise tag, meaning teams can still offer him a contract. The Ravens get a chance to match. And if they don't match, the Ravens get the 2 first-round picks from said team. I believe it's 2024 and 2025, though. I don't think they would touch the picks this year. Not fully certain on that, but I think that's the way it goes. Yeah, alrighty. So I'm just going to roll right into the Combine recap. So my main thing from both Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes, I'll start with Brad Holmes. A lot of people are doing the same thing we did last year. when it gets to this point in the offseason, and every fan does this for every fan base, it's swing big. It's go get the big name free agents. We're right there. Go make the move. And Dan Campbell, finally a Real Lions show. Thank you for tuning in, whoever that actually is. Yeah, so everyone's trying to make the big moves for their team every year. Brad Holmes came to the press conference this year in Indy at the Combine and pretty much shut all that down. Said that we're sticking with the same formula that's got us to where we are now. Instead of trying to get the best player at a position in need in the offseason, it's who fits the roles that we're looking for. Now, I still think there's some pretty big names in play because of that. At that middle linebacker spot, I do believe that Bobby Wagner is still in play. Same with Tremaine Edmonds. Now, I don't know if we'll go with one of those two, but I think they're both still in play. For corner, they did say we could use a Jalen Ramsey type, so Jalen Ramsey is likely still in play. I'm looking more towards the free agent market, though, and Jamel Dean or Jonathan Jones, I believe his name is. Something Jones from New England. I believe those guys are going to be more in play than just the best player at every position of need. Dan Campbell says, you better say nice things about my presser. I loved everything that was said in there about it, honestly. My big thing to take away from Dan Campbell's press conference was the fact that they said they interviewed like 35 people and only 4 of them really checked the box for that competitive it factor. So I'm going to kind of hop right into that and who could be the 4 players that Campbell referenced. So typically you're interviewing a lot of the higher draft picks in this scenario. You kind of leave the mid to late draft picks for when you go visit like pro day, that kind of stuff, or bring them in for individual visits. So I'm thinking whoever their top 35 were on the board, that's who they brought in. As far as who the 4 players are that Campbell referenced, I think one of them right away has to be Bijan Robinson. He's far and away the best running back in the draft. Most players, when they're that far ahead of everyone else in their positional group, don't perform at the Combine. And I might be paraphrasing a little bit, but he was saying that he wanted to compete at the Combine just because he wanted to show the competitor that he is. He wanted to be there to compete. And that just screams somebody that Dan Campbell will absolutely love. As of now, running back is a position in need because we don't have Jamal Williams on the roster. And DeAndre Swift is going into his last year. I think that's absolutely one of the players that he referenced. And I think could be in play at 6. As much as I would rather stick to defense and go either defensive tackle or corner, I think Bijan Robinson is realistically in play. And Ben, if you guys had the money to keep him, he'd probably stay there. But sorry, I do think it's realistic that he ends up in the Honolulu Blue. I'm kind of hoping for it, to be honest. Him being, I think he's 25, 26, and pairing opposite of Jeff Okudah, and then we can still draft a corner and light that fire under Okudah, like, hey, this is your last year. You better make sure you perform like last year. I think that would be huge for them. I think one of the players has to be Tyree Wilson. Just a guy that measured out really well in all the physical categories, but he also had a hell of a combine. He was fast, very technical, was very good. Now, I don't think he's there at 6. I'm in the belief that if Chicago picks top 5, they might actually take Tyree Wilson over the other 2 guys we've been talking about all year, and Will Anderson and Jalen Carter. They interviewed him twice at the Combine. That doesn't happen unless you're extremely interested in the player. So I think Chicago might have shown their hand and might actually be going Tyree Wilson. I think one of the other players is Christian Gonzalez. Again, a guy that is in a very loaded position group. A lot of guys that could be in play for the Lions at 6 and or 18, and definitely into the 2nd and 3rd rounds. But this is a guy that kind of separated himself from the group, in my opinion. He's big, he's physical, he's strong. very fast. He ran somewhere in the 4.3s, if I'm not mistaken. And for a guy that big and that technical too, I was quite surprised with how well he moved in the positional drills, the flipping of the hips and that kind of stuff, and running with a guy. I was very impressed by him there. I think that's a very, very realistic pick at 6. And as far as one of the other, like the other guy that maybe Campbell was referencing, I think it might be Will Anderson, honestly. Again, another guy, I talked about Tyree Wilson before. The edge rusher position is very good in this draft class. Again, a guy that was kind of at the point where he wasn't going to be there when the Lions picked at 6, because he was so far ahead of everyone else at the edge rusher position. And now you're hearing all this talk about Tyree Wilson. So he shows up, he competes, and he does very well too. I wouldn't be shocked if he's still gone by the time we pick at 6. But if he's there, it's a guy I would absolutely love to take. Whoever the Facebook user is, thank you for tuning in. I would love if Washington had Christian Gonzalez fall to us. I'm assuming that's Sean by reading the comment. Whoever it is, thank you for tuning in. So I think any of those guys, I was talking to Andrew at work earlier today and was saying, I think Bijan Robinson goes top 10 this year. Just how well he's done, how many of these teams actually kind of need a running back. I think if he's there at 10, Philadelphia might actually take him. The positions they need, you're looking at, other than running back, you're looking at corner if James Bradbury leaves, possibly defensive tackle. You've got Fletcher Cox and the other Javon Hargrave are both free agents this year. Now, do I expect Fletcher Cox to leave? No, but I think Hargrave leaves and gets quite a bit more money that Philly's not going to be able to pay. So at that point, you'd have Fletcher and Jordan Davis. Now, I would still probably draft another guy just because Fletcher only has probably a year or two left. And it allows the guy to get into the system, kind of get used to the NFL speed, and then you can roll him in. But other than that, they don't really have many needs. So if you're looking at that, defensive tackle is a fairly deep position, and corner is a very deep position. So if you're them, why not take Bijan? You've got 30 where you could take a corner or defensive tackle, just best available out of the two positions. And you could absolutely go Bijan. And the Lions are realistically, they're in a spot where running back is a big need, and if they do the right things in free agency, you could go Bijan. I know there's people saying go Anthony Richardson, and I have an actual section for why I don't want Anthony Richardson. To me, you look at the comment, yes, everyone sees the freak physical traits, very fast, very explosive, jumped farther and higher than any quarterback has jumped in combine history. Off the charts on the off the field stuff. When it came to on the field stuff, his deep throws were electrifying. He was throwing 60 yards on the money to the guy, but couldn't hit an inaccurate pass within 15 yards. If you go watch his entire throw segment, he missed all 3 out routes. He had one kind of down at the hip, one where the guy had to jump, and then one where it was too high. The guy jumped and it went over his hands. Corner routes were kind of the same thing. He was all over the place with that. The little whip routes, I mean, you're throwing to a guy 3 yards in front of you, so I'd hope you hit that. And then the fade routes he really struggled with. Threw it too far. Just kind of kept leading his receivers out of bounds on all those boundary routes. So that's a guy I don't really want. If you can't hit the short routes, especially when we have a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown, and if we keep DeAndre Swift, who's one of the elite pass catchers as a running back, I don't think Anthony Richardson is a good fit. Now, that is stuff you can work on, but I don't want to take a guy at 6 that has a bunch of things to work on. I want a guy at 6. If we were to take a quarterback, I'd probably prefer a CJ Stroud personally, just because he's a guy that it's very few technical things to work on. He's a very solid quarterback. And then you could sit him for a year or two behind Goff and then move on from him if the contract's going to be too much, which based on the contracts I got signed this last week or two, it is going to be way too much. So if you're going to go quarterback, I would say CJ Stroud or maybe even Bryce Young. He's a little too small for my liking, but behind that offensive line, I think you can make it work. Yeah, I think the only real thing to touch on this offense right now, if you're looking at a starter, is potentially running back. So stay away from Anthony Richardson, please. I would much rather trade that pick. You're looking at I don't think Houston's going quarterback. I don't. I think they're gonna get a Garoppolo or someone like that, or maybe even stay with Davis Mills. Get to a few of these comments here because I want to answer the one down there. I would absolutely entertain the idea of Derrick Henry. I don't think he's actually going to get traded. The Titans came out today and said they aren't trading him, but you were looking into trades, so you might actually be trading him. And we're at that point in the offseason where you say 3 things and mean 100 different things. So kind of take everything at face value. But Derrick Henry behind this offensive line would be amazing. I would absolutely entertain that idea. So you're saying Anthony Richardson, Jameis to Session. Absolutely. That's a lot of what I saw. In the 40, the combine part of it, I saw a mix of Cam Newton and Justin Fields. And then you turn on the throwing, and when you watch just the highlight tape, again, you see Justin Fields, that elite deep ball, just money 40 yards and deep. But when I saw that, those shorter routes, it was just that immediately was just like, yeah, no, I'll pass on him. I'm not a fan of him. At 6, if he was there at 18, you could entertain it, but he won't be there. He'll go top 10. I don't got anything against little guys. I'm just being realistic. When you're a quarterback that's barely 6 foot, if you're even 6 foot, and you got to be able to see over guys that are 6'5" and taller, at some position, 6'3" to 6'6", 6'7" for the Lions, that don't work too well. And a lot of our routes go across the middle of the field, especially with Amon-Ra, Khalif Raymond, Josh Reynolds even. So it's a lot of over the middle routes, and you got to be able to see that. So I don't think Bryce Young is necessarily a fit for our offense. He's a hell of a quarterback, extremely talented, but I don't think he's a great fit here. All right, that was my combine recap. I'm gonna head into the weekly article. So yeah, I ranked all 15 of Brad Holmes' draft picks. I looked at where they were drafted, kind of who was around them, and the impact they've made so far. So my worst one, gonna get Drew Brees, Doug Flutie. They were all playing behind a bit shorter offensive lines than what we have too, personally. So, and Drew Brees was throwing a lot of deep routes down the sideline, where that gap tends to open up. Because the tackle typically goes back, so you can see down the lane there. And Doug Flutie ran around all the time, so he wasn't really in the pocket. Sammy, thank you for tuning in. Who are the Lions going to take? If I had to pick right now who I think they're going to take, I actually think Jalen Carter might be there at 6. I'll explain my thinking there. I think Chicago trades back with Indianapolis. Indy takes, I think it's going to be CJ Stroud. Houston, I think, is going to go with, I'll say, Will Anderson. Arizona, I think they're going to go Tyree Wilson. I think he fits a bit better than what Jalen Carter and them. I think they need the edge pressure more than they do the interior pressure there. If Zach Allen resigns there, you can slide him inside. At 4, I've got Chicago. I think they trade again. I'm going to say with Vegas this time just because they seem like the odd team out in free agency. And I'm going to have them take Bryce Young. And then at 5 is Seattle. And then I could see Jalen Carter going there. But I'm actually going to have them trade back too with Carolina. And Carolina's going to move up and take what that would be Will Levis is left of those top 3 quarterbacks. And then Detroit sitting there at 6. You've got Jalen Carter, who could be off their board after that stuff with the police earlier this week with the racing and everything that ended in the tragic loss of his teammate and staff member. Christian Gonzalez is there. Anthony Richardson's there. Bijan Robinson's there. Miles Murphy is there. Brian Brzee, although I think he might be there in the second round. We'll see. He's kind of a wild card at this point. I'm down to either Gonzalez or Carter at that point. And then at 18, I'm going to say the best corner that's available because I don't have Gonzalez going at 6. I'd like to think the Lions are going to take a QB. I hope we take a 3rd, 4th, 5th round quarterback. A Hendon Hooker, Stetson Bennett even, a Dorian Thompson-Robinson from UCLA was a big riser for me. He had a great combine, threw very well, was very athletic. The kid from Stanford, me and Andrew talk about him all the time. I'm just blanking on his name right now. I would really like him too. He reminds me of Jared Goff a lot. But I hope we take one of those guys and kind of develop them a little bit. That's my thought on that. Ben, it all depends on what they get at quarterback in the offseason here. I have them missing out on all those guys, so I have them trading up to 4 and getting a quarterback. I don't think they'd trade up for Jalen Carter. Thank you, Tanner McKee. Yeah, I want one of those guys personally, and to let them develop for a couple years behind Goff, and then see what that contract's going to be for Goff. Potentially move on, or re-sign him, and we'll see what happens. But I don't want a guy to start anytime soon. All right, the 15th player out of 15, I have Levi on Onwuzurike. The 41st pick in 2021, round 2 selection. He hasn't been able to play. He's been hurt the majority of the time. He rotated in the majority of 2021 and then was injured the entirety of this year. And it didn't sound too promising when Brad Holmes was talking about him at the Combine. I feel like this is a guy where his spot is absolutely up for grabs, especially how well the young defensive lineman played last year. I think this is a guy that could potentially be off the roster come September. Another guy that's fighting for his spot here, the next 2 are actually Ifeatu Melifonwu, round 3, pick 101 in 2021. This is a guy that, when he was first coming in, he was solid. We played the Packers week 2 of 2021 on Monday Night Football, and we lost Okudah either late week 1 or early week 2, and then he came in and was man-to-man on Devontae Adams. And until he got hurt partway through the third quarter, Devontae Adams was shut down. So he was going toe-to-toe with one of the elite receivers in the NFL, and then got hurt. I can't remember what he hurt. I want to say his hip for some reason. And then he came back and just wasn't the same. And then they rotated him to safety, where you had Deshaun Elliott come in on that cheap prove-it deal, and he played very well after coming back from being benched. Obviously, you had Kirby Joseph come in and play very well. I think there's too many guys competing for so few spots that he might be on the outside looking in come the end of August when cuts are made for the 53-man roster. But he'd be a solid guy to have on the practice squad or to be that depth piece if he turns it around here. The other guy in the same boat fighting for his spot is Chase Lucas, the 7th round pick this year. He's like 20 picks before Brock Purdy, so right near the end of the draft. You're not expecting much, and he didn't really do anything. He dressed for a couple games this year, but he's been a solid guy in practice. It sounds like they really like him, and it's just a spot again where there's so many young corners, and they're probably going to bring in a few more. He might be on the outside looking in. We'll have to see what happens there. Number 12, another guy in round 7, Jamar Jefferson, running back from Oregon State, was the 257th pick in 2021. Just shows you how many more picks there were in that draft than in 2022. Just all the compensatory picks. But Jamar Jefferson, when he got in, he was solid. He was very good. Saw a couple games in 2021. And then just with that stable of running backs we had with Jamal Williams, DeAndre Swift, Justin Jackson, Craig Reynolds, he was the 5th best running back out of a group of very good running backs where a lot of those guys are 1s or 2s on different rosters. And he was practice roster, but he had to be one of the guys they protected. As you know, there's a few spots that you protect every week. A few players on that practice roster, and he was one of them. It's a guy that I hope he gets a chance either with us or they let him go get his chance somewhere else because he's a very solid running back, and I'd like to see him do well. And this is the point where we get to the part that shows just how well Brad Holmes is drafted. Number 11 is James Mitchell, the 5th round pick, 177th overall in 2022. He's a guy that, when he was called upon, was absolutely solid. He was only targeted 11 times, but caught all 11 for, I want to say, like between 110, 120 yards and a touchdown. So he's averaging 10 yards a catch. A guy that kind of got his chance to shine a little bit once Hawkinson was traded, and they just kind of went to the stable of tight ends. It was a guy coming off an ACL tear in his last year of college, too. So I was very happy with how he played. He's not that much of a blocker. He's improving as a blocker, but he's more of a receiving tight end. He's going to fight for that starting tight end spot. I'm very happy with how he played this past year and hope he continues to develop. Number 10 is Derek Barnes, the 113th pick in round 4 of 2021. The second half of a back-to-back selection. We'll get to the other one in a bit. He's closer to number 1 and number 10. I'll let you guess who that is if you want to. Derek Barnes, he was kind of a prospect. He was a very raw developmental guy, freakish speed for a linebacker, very good at going sideline to sideline, but kind of struggled reading the offense a little bit. So they stuck him on special teams. He did very well. He worked his way into the defense in 2021 and was quite solid as a blitzing linebacker. Wasn't great in coverage, but good at stopping the run. And then this year, he just kind of fell out of the rotation a little bit, but was still extremely solid on special teams. One of the leading tacklers on special teams, had forced fumbles, fumble recoveries, was a game changer on that third unit of the team. With Alex Anzalone on his way out, might be re-signed, might not, but it gives Derek Barnes a better chance to try and crack this starting lineup. Sounds like they're sticking with more of a 40 front this year in Detroit too, so that opens up that outside linebacker spot that he fits very well. Hopefully he continues to develop because he's been very solid. Before I get to number 9, I'm just going to read some more of the comments here. Where were we at? Sammy said, where do the Lions pick? So in round 1, it's 6 and 18. And in round 2, it's 2 picks are very close to each other. It's 48 and 55. So we've got some pretty good draft capital this year, and a lot of chances to get impact players. And these were 2 names I forgot about as well. Thank you, Sean. Would I look at Jaron Hall or Jake Haener? I believe Jaron Hall actually ended up staying back. I think he's going – no. He said he was going back, and then he ended up coming out. But those are 2 guys I would absolutely look at. Jaron Hall is the perfect development guy, absolute cannon of an arm, extremely athletic. The same reason I like Hendon Hooker a lot is there's just smaller points to fine-tune. But he's a very, very good developmental quarterback. I would absolutely look at him. And Jake Haener, I would definitely look at him too. He crushed it at Fresno State. went into the Senior Bowl this year and killed it in the game. Max Duggan was the talk of the town during the practices, but then when it came game time, it was all Jake Haener. Absolutely somebody I would look at. Max Duggan is another guy, depending on where he's drafted, that I would absolutely look at too. All right, number 9. The 46th pick in 2022, Josh Pascal, the defensive end from Kentucky. He was a guy that he got hurt in training camp, so he missed the first 6 weeks of the regular season. Came back for week 7 at Dallas and kind of struggled to find his footing a little bit in that massive overtaking of the young defensive lineman. Eventually, he played like the first 3-4 games from week 7 to 11 there, and then was out of the lineup for another week, and then came back in and he got his confidence, which was huge. He was very good in the run game, got pressure on the quarterback, which was surprising for me because I was not a fan of his pass rush ability coming out of Kentucky, but he did quite well at getting after the passer, didn't have the sacks to go with it, but was making the quarterback's life hell. So it was very intriguing to see. And it'll be interesting to see where he fits into this rotation. You've got James Houston, who we'll talk about fairly soon here. We got Aiden Hutchinson. You got Julian Okwara, Romeo Okwara, sorry. There's just a lot of names to go around there. Now, Josh Pascal, a thing that works for him is his versatility. He's very good at pass rushing from the interior. So you could put him beside Aleem McNeil and allow him to get that pressure from inside. But I love Josh Pascal's ability and the way he finished the year, so hopefully he can build off that and have a great 2023. Some people might be a little surprised to see this guy this low, but Jameson Williams is number 8 for me. And it's mostly just because we didn't hardly see anything out of him. He didn't play until week 13. And, I mean, first game he was in, he had a reception for 41 yards and a touchdown. But that was his only reception on the year. He struggled to get the connection with Jared Goff. And that was the whole reason you heard, if you listened to Brad Holmes' press conference at the Combine, he talked about JMO and accountability. So what he was referencing there is it's up to Jameson Williams and Jared Goff both to figure out that connection. Figure out, okay, why were we 5 yards off here? Why were we 3 yards off there? Why were we 1 yard off there? Am I underthrowing him? Is Jameson overrunning the route? What the issue is there? So it's up to both of them to figure that out. I think this guy could be an absolute X factor for this offense, though. He had 2 touches the entire year. I already talked about that 41-yard touchdown reception. He had 1 rush for 40 yards. So the guy can touch the ball and take it to the house every single time. He almost did with that run. He was very close again. But the guy could be an absolute weapon as long as they figure out how to get that connection between him and Jared Goff rolling. And I can't wait to see what he does in 2023 here. Hopefully he becomes that dynamic weapon everyone was hoping he'd become. Number 7, I got Aleem McNeil, the nose tackle out of, I believe, NC State. 72nd pick in 2021. He's a guy that I considered a developmental prospect when he was drafted, and then all he did was come in and kind of take over that interior of that defense. He's the reason Michael Brockers, who we were paying $10 million a year, was a healthy scratch week in and week out this past year because Aleem McNeil just took over the middle of that defense. He's a phenomenal run stopper, eats up two guys in that run blocking scheme. Because I know I got Andrew and Ben watching, he's a poor man's Vita Vea. He's not nearly as good as Vita is, but he does everything that you ask Vita Vea to do. Aleem McNeil does all the same things, and he's not as good of a pass rusher as Vita, but in the run game, they're fairly similar. I love watching Aleem McNeil play. I just wish he had a little bit more help when it came to the run defense, because for a guy that good to be a part of the worst run defense in the NFL, it makes me feel kind of bad for him. But hopefully they shore that up, and then he becomes the anchor of a solid run defense in 2023. One of the bigger steals, I got back-to-back massive steals from the 2022 draft. Obviously, they're not the biggest steal because the biggest steal was the last pick in the 2022 draft. But James Houston, pick 217 in the draft. The edge rusher from Jackson State. There we go. It still amazes me listening to his whole draft story. The Lions didn't talk to him once. They didn't talk to him at the combine. They didn't talk to him when they went. I don't even know if they went to the Jackson State Pro Day and saw him perform. I don't know if they just watched his tape and was like, this is a guy we need at this point. But I'm glad I'm so glad they took him. I mean, he's nicknamed the problem for a reason. All he did was play from Thanksgiving on and end up with 8.5 sacks, which was second in all rookies behind a guy we'll talk about in just a second. But he was amazing when he came in. And this was a guy I thought maybe 3-4 years down the road could be a above average pass rusher. He came in and was elite at getting after the quarterback right away. Like, think about that. In 5 games, 6 games, he had 8.5 sacks. That's elite production. So hopefully him and Aiden Hutchinson can build on that, and that's the whole reason I've been saying we don't need an edge rusher. That's the whole reason I strayed away from Tyree Wilson, Miles Murphy, all those guys that could be in play at 6. It's because these guys, the two of them combined for almost 18 sacks. And that's with one of them playing 5 games. So I'm more than happy with James Houston. The only reason he's at 6 and not higher is just because of the impact these other guys have had. And number 5, the one of the stars of Hard Knocks, Malcolm Rodriguez. I mean, when you're a 6th-round rookie and Jason Kelsey's talking about you on his podcast after you play him week 1 because you judo throw him, it's a pretty big deal. This guy had a lot of elite offensive linemen saying, okay, this guy's legit. You saw it if you watch Hard Knocks. He immediately took over that linebacker room, just outperformed everybody, and was our best linebacker this year. I know Anzalone led the Lions in tackles, but Rodriguez was the guy in that linebacking group. And if Anzalone leaves, or even if he comes back, I think Rodrigo takes a step up. Becomes the leader of that defense and just improves on an amazing rookie year in 2022. Are you going to the draft? Say, I would love to. We're planning on doing a bunch of us going. I'm all the way out in Alberta, Canada, so I'm on the west side of the country. But there's a bunch of us planning to make a trip next year to 2024 for the draft. I would absolutely love to go. And I'm hoping to catch a Lions game this year, hoping to make my way out there for a game this year. But yeah, really, really hoping to make the draft next year. I think it would be a lot of fun. Number 4, Kirby Joseph, the 97th pick out of round 3 in 2022 from Illinois. I mean, considering there's only one other person to pick off Aaron Rodgers 3 times in an entire career, that being Brian Urlacher. And Kirby Joseph did it in 2 games. The 2 games this year that he played Aaron Rodgers, he combined for 3 interceptions. Had another one, but it got called away on a penalty. Oh, okay. That's cool. So you're right across the border then. I've driven that tunnel quite a few times. I used to live in Ontario, so I need to go back home hopefully this year. But yeah, Kirby Joseph, picked Rodgers off 3 times. It's only the second person to ever do it. Took over once Tracy Walker tore his Achilles there, and Deshaun Elliott got benched, and really, really took a hold of that safety room. He performed right away. Was good in coverage, whether it was man or zone. Was great at reading the quarterback. Everything you needed him to do, he did very well. He's a guy that's not afraid to tackle, which at the safety position is huge. Very good on his angles, his reads. Everything he did, I was I was amazed with. Because, again, this was another guy that when we drafted him, I didn't know too much about him, so I went and watched his tape, and I was like, okay, I see the potential, but he's a developmental guy, and that development only took a few weeks. Then he was in. So I'm glad I was wrong about him, and hopefully he continues to develop into a very, very solid safety with Pro Bowl potential in the next few years. Hopefully he builds on that. These next three guys have all either made a Pro Bowl or are going to make a Pro Bowl very soon. Number 3 is Aiden Hutchinson, the second overall pick from last year's draft. He had 9 sacks, 3 interceptions, I believe 9 tackles for a loss. Was everywhere. He was great in the passing game. He was great in the running game. There's a couple very nitpicky things I would go after. He's a little too eager to jump inside, leaving the outside rush lane for the quarterback. Little things like that. But when you're a rookie and you're immediately taking double teams from the offensive line, you've gained the respect early, and he did right off the bat. I mean, you watch even the preseason game. I know it was preseason week 1, but you're still playing the starters for that first drive or two. And when we were playing Atlanta, he made their tackles look like rookies, and he looked like the seasoned veteran. And he did that to quite a few offensive lines this year. Got after Aaron Rodgers very well. Obviously, he intercepted him. I want to say twice, maybe just once. I know he intercepted Daniel Jones once, one of his only 5 interceptions. But Aiden Hutchinson had a very good year. I think this is a guy that in the next couple of years could develop into that top 10 edge rusher in the league. I don't think that's unrealistic to say. Sammy, I would love to. I'm trying to meet as many people as I can, especially if I go to that draft in 2024 or even going to the Lions game hopefully this year. I'd love to meet as many of these Lions fans as I can. Yeah, I wanted to leave that one alone since you were in here, Sean. But yeah, he had, I want to say, 3-4 sacks. Was very, very dangerous against Washington. And he built on that. He had a very solid 2022. There's a lot of people that argue whether or not he should have been the Defensive Rookie of the Year. If you look at just the stats, he was absolutely Defensive Rookie of the Year, beat Sauce Gardner in pretty much every single category, including interceptions. But just the sheer fact that Sauce was a top 5 corner in the league after his rookie year, I think you give it to him. I had no issues with that. But Hutchinson is an absolute problem. Oh, I just spoiled number 2. And I think that he's going to develop into that top 10 edge rusher, as I said before. I was so glad we picked him. And I have to think that Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes are too. He's shown up and showed out this year and been very solid. Yeah, Sean said he was there. He looked better in person. Plus his intro is just like a WWE intro as far as excitement. Yeah, well, and that's a big factor when it's a kid that's played in the Detroit area his entire life. Born and raised in the area. So when you can have all the local people that have watched him from middle school, high school, playing at Michigan, and now for the Detroit Lions, it adds a lot of excitement to it. And I hope he's a Lion for life. I think it was just a phenomenal draft pick and an absolute building block to finish this rebuild with. Number 2, I already spoiled it. It's Penei Sewell, the 7th overall pick in 2021. A guy that's the top 10 right tackle already. And probably a top 15 overall tackle in the NFL. Only allowed 2 sacks this past year. Only had, I want to say, at most it was 10 penalties. Might have even been single digits. A guy that they're confident enough to get the ball in his hands in key situations. He helped close out the game against Minnesota in Week 13. I mean, what more can you say about this guy? It's a guy that when we played the Rams in Week 7 of 2021, Aaron Donald had already tried to choke out 2 offensive linemen in the first 6 weeks of that season. And he tried doing it to Penei, and Penei did it right back. Like, just fought right back against him, showed him he wasn't backing down, and played very well against the premier edge rusher in the NFL at that point. Shut down Micah Parsons when we played him week 7. It's just that scenario where he can take that best edge rusher and not necessarily shut them down, but neutralize them for large parts of the game. Every elite edge rusher is going to get theirs at some point, and he does everything in his power to limit it, and he did that phenomenally in 2022. I think it's very realistic that in the next few years, especially if Tristan Wirfs transitions to left tackle, that he becomes the best right tackle in football. And it'll be interesting to see what they do once Taylor Decker moves on, if Panay slides over to left tackle or sticks at right tackle. But he showed his rookie year he was pretty good at left tackle too. So this is a guy that can do it all for you. He's quickly become the leader of that offensive line. And again, another guy I hope is a Lion for life. This was a guy in the 2021 draft. I was like, if he's there for us, I'd love to take him. But I didn't think he was going to be there, and he was. And we ran back-to-back years with both Hutchinson and Sewell. We got in trouble for getting to the draft podium a little too fast. They didn't like that we made our pick so fast, but when you've got guys that good still sitting there, you got to jump on it. And they did for both of them, and they become absolute building blocks for this team. My number one player, he knows all 13, I think it is, wide receivers that were drafted before him in the 2021 draft. It is the first part of that back-to-back selection in the 4th round. It's Amon-Ra St. Brown, 112th selection in 2021. He broke every single Lions rookie receiving record in 2021, and all he did was smash all those numbers in 2022. He passed the 100 reception mark, passed the 1,000-yard receiving yard mark, and beat the touchdown mark that he had in 2021. He only had 6 touchdowns this year, but of the 29, I believe it is, that Jared Goff threw, he had the most of all 10 players that caught a pass from him, or a touchdown pass from him. Amon-Ra St. Brown is the focal game of the passing game. And it's to the point where defenses target him and try to limit him, and you still can't do it. Whether it's him as a running back, him out in the slot, and there's times where you line him up out wide and he still makes guys look silly. This is a guy that's, I won't say top 10, I'll say top 15 wide receiver in the NFL, but he's a top 5 slot receiver in the NFL. I will say that. There's not too many guys in the slot I would take over Amon-Ra St. Brown. The guy's been phenomenal. The Sun God has been absolutely amazing for us. I love everything he does, and it's insane to think that a guy that's a 4th round selection is the guy on your offense. And the fact that they didn't pass it to him on the last 3rd down of the game versus the Packers cost me my fantasy football championship. I have him in quite a few leagues, and I'm planning to hold on to him. He's that special, I really feel. Anthony, thank you for tuning in, says yo. What's up, Anthony? I'm really hoping we get your boy Darnell Washington in the 2nd round. I don't think he's going to be there, though. I think he became a 1st round pick. Oh, actually, that just made me think. Where I was saying Will Anderson might have been the 4th player, I actually think it might have been Nolan Smith. Now that I think about it, coming off that injury and coming back into the fold in the offseason there, and what he did at the combine, holy crap, he was phenomenal. He's a guy that I think is a top 15 lock at this point. I think if he's there for Green Bay at 15, they won't hesitate to draft him. He's a guy I'd be okay with taking at 6 or trading back a little bit and getting him. He was the number 1 recruit at a high school. All he did was play phenomenally in a loaded Georgia defense full of 5-stars and NFL players, and he stood out. So that's a guy I would absolutely love to take. All right, and the last little bit of the show I got today is why the Lions should stay away from Lamar Jackson. He got the non-exclusive franchise tag today, meaning that everyone has a chance to go and sign him. That offer that Lamar would agree to then goes back to the Ravens. They have a chance to match it. And if the Ravens don't match it, they get 2 first-round picks for him. So I've seen everyone saying, well, it was supposed to be Goff and 3 first-round picks, so why not just give Lamar a contract and the 2 first-round picks and trade Goff away? First of all, you're going to have to give Lamar Jackson probably, especially the fact that Daniel Jones got $40 million a year today, it's at least 45, if not 50, for Lamar. I don't think the Lions are in a position to do that. I think with the Penei Sewell extension coming fairly soon, Amon-Ra coming soon, you already got to look at Hutchinson, Kirby Joseph, those guys. There's too many contracts that are going to need renegotiating right away to put that kind of money into Lamar Jackson. And I'm not even going off the fact that he missed a bunch of games, that kind of stuff, because he didn't really miss that many over, if you look at the last few years. And I think he only missed that many because he was waiting on a contract extension. Didn't want to re-aggravate the injury. I think he could have came back and played if he wanted to. I just think he chose to sit out, and good on him. Save yourself, get that money. I have no issue with that. I don't think it's the right scenario for the Lions, and Jared Goff led a top 3 offense this year. If you look at most of the statistical categories, they went through it last week. Lions were top 5 to top 10 in everything. And Jared Goff is at the forefront of that. They built this offense around Goff, what he likes, what he doesn't like, got removed. What works for him is at the forefront of every game plan every week. And all he did was ball out for this offense. So I'm over it when people are saying, let's move Goff and get this quarterback or that quarterback, or let's trade Goff and draft one of the guys in the first round to start this year. We're not at that position anymore. We're at the next step of the rebuild where it's, let's finish this off and try and push for playoffs. And I think we do make playoffs this year. If you look at the betting odds, we're supposed to win the division this year. So Vegas agrees that we're not at that point of the rebuild anymore. It's time to buckle down and make the plays to try and compete in the playoffs. And moving off of Jared Goff and paying $50 million to a quarterback doesn't do that for me. So I think that you stick with Goff. I don't think Lamar's going anywhere either. I think this is letting Lamar see most of these teams don't have the money to pay him what he's looking for. So he's going to have to come back to the Ravens and either play on that franchise tag and hope the next year somebody has the money, or sign that extension with Baltimore, which I think is ultimately what ends up happening. I don't think he goes anywhere. I'd be shocked to see him go anywhere, especially how many teams came out and said, yeah, we're not interested. I think Lamar Jackson is a Raven for the foreseeable future. Anthony said between Big O and Brock Bowers next year. And then he said Big O this year and Brock next year. The UGA tight end squad will be making some noise in the league by next year if all stay healthy. Yeah, I think Big O's worked himself into a first-round draft pick, and Brock Bowers is a top 10 pick next year. I fully expect that. The kid is an absolute weapon. He's elite in essentially everything he does. I think that is a difference maker for any offense. And minus all the quarterbacks going top 10 next year, I think he could very easily be a top 10 pick. Lamar's a good quarterback. Don't get me wrong. He's not what Detroit needs. Detroit needs to build around Jared Goff. And that's where I'm going to leave that. That's all I got for today. I went longer than I thought I was going to. I was only expecting a half hour this week. But thank you guys for tuning in. Next week, we'll be looking at free agency because it'll be a day or two before it actually opens. We'll discuss, the negotiation period will already be open. So there might already be some signings. Hopefully a Jamal Williams extension by then. And we'll kind of look forward to what's ahead in the offseason. Thank you again for tuning in. You can catch me here every Tuesday. You can catch me Thursday nights on the NFL edition with Johnny, Ben, and Alec. You can catch me Friday nights on North Sports Dynasty on this network with Andrew, Chris, and Sid. And you can catch me Saturday mornings for Let's Talk College Football with Mr. Sean Spencer. All the guys in the comments here. Thank you all for tuning in. Sammy, thank you for tuning in. A new viewer this week. Damn Campbell, again, thank you for tuning in. Again, show sponsored by Zangief Apparel. Use the code word FOOBS15 at checkout and get 15% off on select items. Thank you again to Zangief Apparel Design, which check him out. Anthony Handy is doing some great things. I'll give you a shout out as well. Hosts the Let's Talk Football the Roundtable with Nick Rosario and Delilah Crespo, and also does This Week in UGA Football. Definitely go check him out. He does amazing work. He's usually with us on Thursday nights as well. He's essentially become another co-host. He's there all the time. So, catch us on Thursday. And, that's all I got for now. And I will see you next week.